So I want to start making videos about the different books that I read. So just that real quick. About the different books that I read. I used to read a lot in high school, and something I really enjoyed, but I had to stop because I was focusing too much on reading. But now that I'm not in school, I can focus on it again and start reading and start developing my reading speed. I used to be really fast at reading. My reading speed, and using it as an opportunity to practice my speaking as well. For example, reading out loud to not perfect, but improve on my pronunciations, and not only pronunciations but structuring of sentences as I speak, to be able to properly pronounce and structure whatever I say in a cohesive and orderly manner. So this book is called The Obstacle Is the Way by Ryan Holiday by Ryan Holiday. A friend of mine recommended I read this book about a year ago. I'd gotten it, but I hadn't really gotten the time to read it. But I'm gonna start reading the book. The Obstacle Is the Way, and it has 3 parts to the book. Right, the first, and I will be focusing on the first part, which is perception, and I will talk about 2 of the chapters. The first one being the discipline of perception, and the second one being recognize your power. All right, and these are just main things that I'm taking away. Since this is a self-help book, I want to focus on the things that I need to improve, because as I was reading the book, I noticed a lot of these things, and now a lot of these topics I had already been learning them, I guess, or I had already been exposed through the situations situations and circumstances that I've been in my life. So some of these topics aren't exactly new to me, and I've already had these thoughts in my head. But definitely, I want to work on the things that I'm lacking. So, start with the discipline of perception. And one of the things that I took from this chapter, the discipline of perception, right? It is actively. This chapter is basically talking about actively changing your perspective, right? Which turning it from what our current perspective is to a new one where it's more feasible for us to overcome the obstacle, right? A change in perspective. So in page 15, I highlighted this sentence where it reads, "They meant it," talking about Rockefeller, and as he started his business, he received a lot of critiques, and one of the things he did was, he reads here, "They meant it as a criticism, but it was actually a function of Rockefeller's personality," right? Resilient, adaptable, calm, and brilliant. So despite the criticisms, right? What I take from this is that Rockefeller made it his personality to be resilient, adaptable, calm, brilliant. He chose to have these attributes mold his personality of who he wanted to be. These 4 attributes, what was Rockefeller wanted for himself. And that's really powerful, because in the same way, we can do the same. Whatever attributes we want for ourselves, we have to make those attributes our personality, whether it be a social person, or a brave, or fearless, or adaptable, or whatever it may be that you're lacking in your life, you need to make it your personality. You need to make it yours. And that's crazy because you form who you are. You're not born a specific way. You have what's the word? You have influences in your lives, but at the end of the day, the biggest influence on your life is yourself. Only you can bring these attributes to yourself, right? So, as people, we form our personalities. And that's powerful. So we don't have an excuse. Another thing on the next page, page 16, it reads, you will learn that this reaction determines how successful we will be in overcoming or possibly thriving because of them, right? Talking about obstacles in our lives. How we react to the obstacles determines the outcome, right? So if we see an impossible challenge or a very difficult obstacle in our ways, and we see it as impossible to overcome or very difficult to overcome, or even, yes, it can be overcome, but not by someone like me, then you're setting yourself up to fail. Your reaction does determine how successful you are. If you see it as an opportunity for you to grow, immediately. If you get excited for when something bad happens to you, and you think about, oh, the person I'll be after I overcome this, your drive and your motivation to overcome will expand greatly. So you need to react to it in a way where it will build you. Right? Another thing is, nothing makes us feel this way. We choose to give into such feelings. Or like Rockefeller chose not to. And it's true. Just because it's hard means we should be fearful. Just because it's difficult means we should give up. And it's true. We choose to be afraid. We choose to give up. We choose to look at it as something impossible or difficult. But if you choose not to, you say, no, it's not difficult. No, it's not impossible. No, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not going to give up. Then it changes the perspective. That's the key to changing the perspective of how you see things. That's very big. If you've already given up, as soon as the challenge starts, you have zero possibilities of winning, zero possibilities of coming out triumphant. So you can't give in to fear, or to you can't succumb to that challenge. You need to come out. You need to ignore that, actually. You can be fearful because it happens, but don't look at it like that. Don't look at the fear. Don't look at the impossibility. Look at the challenge. Another quote I have is, we can stop seeing the problems in front of us as problems. We can learn to focus on what things really are, right? And many of the times we exaggerate the problem. We make it seem bigger than it is. For example, when I started working at the meat department, and I started learning how to clean the kitchen and clean all the material, all the equipment. At the beginning, it seemed like a lot, an incredible amount of work that I had to do, and it seemed like a lot. Many times I was frustrated. Many times I wanted to give up. I wanted to quit. But it was only for a little bit. After a month or so, month and a half, I looked at the kitchen. I looked at the department itself, and I realized, I was like, hey, this isn't as big as I thought it would. I thought it was. It looks quite small, actually. You know, it's not as big of a deal as I thought it would be. And it's just like that. We need to look at things for what they really are, not for what we think they are. Dumb it down. When you realize what it really is, how maybe not small of a problem it is, but if you focus on how it says here, focus on what things really are, they won't seem as big or as impossible to overcome. And lastly, in the last page of the chapter, it says, there are a few things to keep in mind when faced with a seemingly unsurmountable obstacle. We must try to be objective, to control emotions and keep an even keel, to choose to see the good in a situation, to steady our nerves, to ignore what disturbs or limits others, to place things in perspective, to revert to the present moment, and to focus on what can be controlled. Right? Most of these things I kind of already actively try to do, and there are things I'm well aware of that do happen, but I try almost every time to keep them in check. But the two things that I need to work on are to control emotions and keep an even keel, and to ignore what disturbs or limits others. Right? The truth is, I get nervous, especially when I need to confront somebody. Or that's a big thing about me, is when I want to confront someone, I try to convince myself not to, because it's nervous. I get nervous. I don't want to go up and tell someone off, hey, what you're doing is not right, or even to confront or call someone out for what they're doing when they're not doing something right, especially when it's when it's not correlated, when it's connected to me, or when they're harming me. The other thing is to ignore what disturbs or limits others. Don't focus on other people. Focus on yourself. Focus on what you're doing. There's no point in doing that. There's no point in looking at other people. There's no point. That's something I have to do, because I really think about what other people say, what other people think. I really think about that, and base not a majority, not anymore, because I'm trying to work on that. But I act on what I think people may think about me, and that's something I want to get rid of, and I want to improve, to just ignore that and focus on myself. That's the first chapter in part 1 of Perception, the discipline of perception. Now, in the second chapter of the Perception, the part 1, Perception, it's called Recognize Your Power. Right? Recognize your power. So one thing I took from this is, and the book uses successful people as examples for and how they overcame their obstacles and their challenges. So here it talks about what's his name? Rubin Hurricane Carter, a boxer, heavyweight boxer. So he was, I don't really know much of his story, but it says he was falsely imprisoned, right? And says instead of breaking down, as many would have done in such a bleak situation, Carter declined to surrender the freedoms that were innately his attitude, his beliefs, his choices, right? He declined to surrender the freedoms that were innately his, right? Just because something is difficult. Maybe we're struggling through something, right? And we give up. We completely give up. And we let this problem control our lives, or rule our lives, rule over it. Every time you make a decision, this problem comes into account. it's a limiting factor for us. It cannot be a limiting factor for us. It is not part of us. It is a part. It is a part, not a part from us, but it's departed from us. It's not ours to take. And the problem doesn't take us, right? Doesn't overcome us. We have to overcome the problem. So we can't give up what we already have, right? So that's why it's called an obstacle, right? Because you have to overcome it, not be overcome by it. Then we'd be obstacles to the problem. Does it make sense? But we can't surrender. We can't give up what we already have. We can't let it take away our lives, right? Another thing, can't let it ruin our lives, is through our perception of events, we are complicit in the creation as well as the destruction of every one of our obstacles, right? Through our perception, through how we see it. Like I said, if we see it as bigger than it really is, we're making this obstacle bigger than what it has to be. Bigger than it really is. More destructive for us than it really is, right? But also, through our perception, we can make the problem easier for us to overcome. And that's one of the, I feel like that's one of the main things we have to do, is change our perspective to a way that it'll help us overcome our problems, help us beat or conquer them, instead of making it bigger than it really is. See, perspective is really what helps us a lot. That's why it's the first thing in the chapter, because everyone who's going through something, they see it as something that dominates their lives. They see it as something that is destroying their lives, when in reality it's their perception they have of that problem that's destroying their lives. It's not really the problem, it's the perception. It's what we think about the problem, what we think others will say, what we will think the outcome will be. It's the perception that gets us, not the problem itself. If your perception is already a negative one, you haven't even gotten to the problem. You haven't even gotten to the problem yet. It's literally just the perception itself that is harming you, not the problem. You haven't even gotten to the problem yet. Just because you see it in a certain way, it's already getting you. You haven't even gotten to the problem yet. Another thing is, a mistake becomes training. A mistake becomes training. I don't know about you, but every time I mess something up, or every time, I make a mistake, I always try. And my mind always goes to that place. Next time. What will happen next time? Especially when I know that it's a task or a situation that I am facing, that I'll be facing every week, daily, every month. It's different for everyone. But if you did something and it didn't work, you know what didn't work. So next week, next day, next month, next year, you'll try it differently. I think it's more something like daily or weekly that is more relatable. But once you make a mistake, you know what not to do. And next time, next week, next tomorrow, you'll be able to take a different route or approach the problem in a different way, right? And lastly, says, welcome to the power of perception, applicable in each and every situation, impossible to obstruct. It can only be relinquished, and that is your decision, right? The power to perceive things in a different way, to change reality. It's impossible to not have a perception, right? It's impossible. We always have a perception about everything. It's either good or bad for us. It's annoying. It's enjoyable. Whatever it is. And I really like what it says here. It can only be relinquished. You can choose to give up the perception, the ability to perceive a situation in a different way, in a beneficial way. You relinquish it to your obstacle. You relinquish the ability to perceive to your obstacle. You give it away. By giving it away, you give up. And that's really powerful, because a lot of people do that. A lot of people they just give up. They don't want to see it in a different way. Their mentality, they're stuck. They're stuck in their problem. And they don't want to look at it in a different way. All they see is, oh, I'm stuck in this problem. It can't be changed. It's been the same since day one. I've tried again, and I can't. Every time they say that, every time they say I can't, every time they say I tried, every time they say I've tried this and that, I can't do it. They've relinquished their perception, their power to perceive the situation in a different way. And by doing that, they've given up. So that's some of the things, the first 2 chapters. I'll make another video of the rest. And as I read this book, I'll continue to highlight. Got my stuff highlighted. I know we're penalized or you get in trouble or it's looked bad upon, where you write in your books or you highlight your books. That's what they're for you to study the contents of the material. And especially when you read a book, there's a difference between reading and reading a book, because you want to know the contents of the book. Reading just to read, and reading to learn the contents of the book, the curiosity of what this book has to say. That's a very big way. Again, changing your perspective. Changing your perspective. I want to read because I want to get better at reading. Or I want to read because I want to know what this book says. If it's nonsense, it's nonsense. But if it has one thing of value, that's what you take from the book. So, reading with wanting to know what's inside a book. But The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I encourage you to read the book as well, and to look at yourself too and see if there's anything you need to change. I'll be making another video of the rest of the chapters on perception. Those will be pretty fun. I like talking about this stuff, about books and stuff and ideas. So I'll have a lot of fun with this. Thank you.